thrill seekers. That song was called Mind Train Jam, originally by a band called Sundial. They were a British sort of neo-psychedelic band from the 90s. And that song appeared on a thing called a Psychedelic Sauna in 4 parts, which was on, that was a compilation that Dementia 13 also appeared on in the late 80s, I think, sometime. Anyway, that I re-recorded it and then played a solo on it this morning that I hope you enjoyed. So, somebody asked me if I could explain how to understand Shobo Genzo, which is Dogen's masterwork, and Dogen is the guy who founded this form of Zen Buddhism that I study and practice in, and I'll see what I can do about that. But let me point out that I've written a lot of books. I don't know if people who watch these videos know that I write books. Sometimes I get the impression that people who watch these videos don't know that I write books. I've written 10 books. And among those 10 books that I've written on Buddhism, and I've written some other books not on Buddhism, but among those 10 books are 3 that are specifically about Dogen. Every book I've written has been at least partially about Dogen, but 3 of them have been specifically really focused on Dogen. They are Sit Down and Shut Up, Don't Be a Jerk, and It Came from Beyond Zen. And Sit Down and Shut Up is now available in français, en français, as Assieds-toi et tais-toi, which I believe is a direct translation of Sit Down and Shut Up. So there's my groovy picture on the cover. And all 3 of these books are available in audiobook form and ebook form. So you got no excuses for not reading them, because they're all available in the easy forms. But so in each of these books, I've explained in glorious, gory detail the way I understand how to understand Dogen, with all sorts of examples and just my own rewrites of Dogen and my explanations of it, and etc., etc. There is also a very nice PDF available, and I'll try to put the link below if I can find it. So if you're watching on YouTube and I found the link, I will put the link below on YouTube to a little pamphlet written by my teacher Gudo Wafu Nishijima Roshi, and I believe co-written by his student Mike Lutchford, called Understanding Shobo Genzo, in which my teacher laid out his way of understanding Shobo Genzo. And most of what I want to say in this video comes from that pamphlet, Understanding Shobo Genzo, and a lot of what I wrote in Sit Down and Shut Up, Don't Be a Jerk, and It Came from Beyond Zen comes also from that little pamphlet called Understanding Shobo Genzo. So he lays out, and I'm going to try to go really fast through what's in Understanding Shobo Genzo, and he lays out his understanding of Shobo Genzo, and the thing is, I can lay it out quickly here, but I think understanding Shobo Genzo is not something you're going to get in, I don't know how long this video is going to be. I'm going to try to keep it under 20 minutes, but you're not going to get it in a 20-minute video or 15 minutes or however long this video gets to be. The only way you're going to get it is through repeated work with Shobo Genzo, because Shobo Genzo is a difficult book, and through sitting Zazen, and this comes up in his Understanding Shobo Genzo. Shobo Genzo is a book that is to be read while working on a Zazen practice. It's like if you had a book on how to play baseball, and you tried to understand the book How to Play Baseball without ever playing baseball. You're not really going to get the book. You might really get a deep intellectual understanding of the book, but if you don't actually get out there and swing a bat at a ball, you're not going to get the full understanding of the book. The same with Shobo Genzo. If you don't actually do Zazen, you're not going to get Shobo Genzo in its fullest form, or fullest something. If I were a writer, I would sit down for an hour and a half and think of what word comes after fullest, but I'm a YouTuber right now, and that's the deal. Okay, so understanding Shobo Genzo. In the beginning of his pamphlet on understanding Shobogenzo, Nishijima Roshi points out 4 problems in understanding Shobogenzo. The first is the 4 views, and that's what I'm going to spend the most time on, so I'm just going to skim right over that. And it's the fact that everything that Dogen talks about in Shobogenzo, he talks about from 4 points of view, and I'm going to leave it at that because I'm going to spend a lot more time on that at the end of the video. Second is, he makes a lot of allusions to ancient stuff that's mostly drawn from Chinese Buddhist masters of the past, and most of that stuff is lost on us today. His immediate students who were studying with him at the time that he was writing Shobogenzo would have been with him, Dogen, studying this Chinese stuff, so they would have understood it, but we are not studying all that Chinese stuff, so it's hard for us to follow this. Luckily, editions of Shobogenzo written these days, particularly the one written by, or the one translated by Nishijima and Chodo Mike Cross, Nishijima Roshi's co-translator, have detailed explanations of what this Chinese stuff means and footnotes and stuff like that, so you can go back and understand it yourself. So that stuff's been decoded for us. But if you try to read an edition which does not have this stuff explained to you, you're going to be in trouble. So there's that. Number 3 is that in order to explain what he wants to explain, Dogen had to bend language to make it work to his to what he wants to try to say. Which is to say that even if you get to the point where you can understand Dogen in his original Japanese language, which I've managed to do to a certain degree myself, but not to the, greatest degree ever, but I can sort of get it. Even if you get to that point, it's still weird. So it's not as if it's just because you don't understand Japanese that you don't get this, or that the translation is wrong, because take for example the Nishijima Cross translation, it is really spot on, and it's difficult because he is warping language to try to make it say what he wants to say. It's because language itself is the problem. It's not just that it's because we don't understand Japanese. If he had been a native speaker of English writing in English, he would have written English that was just as difficult for us to understand. So that's another problem. But if you understand the 4 views, which is the first thing I brought up, it makes it a lot easier. And number 4 is Zazen, which I already brought up. Is you gotta do Zazen if you want to understand Shobogenzo. Same as you gotta play baseball if you want to understand the book How to Play Baseball. Okay? So, biggest problem though in Shobogenzo, which dovetails with the problem of the 4 views, is contradictions. Okay? So, Shobogenzo is full of contradictions. Most of the time, if you are a student of Western philosophy, or probably most kinds of philosophies, is if you're raised in Aristotelian philosophy, you understand that A equals A and B equals B, and if you try to say A equals B, that's nonsense, okay? So you can't contradict yourself. Only if you read Dogen, he contradicts himself all over the place. And Nishijima Roshi, in his little book, gives you several examples. For example, there are chapters which contradict each other. A good example is his 2 chapters on the Fox koan, which both appear in my book, It Came From Beyond Zen. In chapter 89 of Shobogenzo, which appears, both of them appear in this book, he says, well, okay, there's a punchline. I'm not going to go into the whole Fox koan. It's the famous Fox koan. If you want to go look up on YouTube, there's a YouTube video called The Famous Fox Koan that I did about the whole thing. In chapter 89, the punchline is it's about whether the person falls into cause and effect or has to not be unclear about cause and effect. In chapter 89, he says they're completely different. In chapter 76, he says they're exactly the same. Okay, so he contradicts himself. That's the point. And he also contradicts himself in the same paragraph. In Busho, Buddha Nature, chapter 22 of Shobogenzo, in the same paragraph, he says all living beings have Buddha nature, and in the next paragraph, he says all living beings do not have Buddha nature. And in Sansui Gyo, chapter 14, he says in one sentence, an eternal Buddha says, mountains are mountains, rivers are rivers. These words do not mean that mountains are mountains, they mean that mountains are mountains. So he is saying, as I said several times in my new book, The Other Side of Nothing, he's not saying it's aliens, but it's aliens. Okay, which is a little quote from Ancient Aliens. So he contradicts himself all the effing time. So what do you do with these contradictions? These contradictions are based on the four views. And the four views is Nishijima Roshi's innovation. And as far as I can tell, Nishijima Roshi is the first one to have come up with this way of understanding Shobogenzo, and it is the key that unlocks the door that helps you understand Shobogenzo. So the best way to see the four philosophies in action in Shobogenzo is to read Genjo Koan, which is one of, I guess it's chapter 3 in most editions of Shobogenzo. It appears in book 1 of the Nishijima Cross Shobogenzo. It appears in book 1 of almost everybody's version of Shobogenzo. And in the Nishijima Cross one, it's called The Realized Universe. And what we're going to talk about is the first paragraph of Genjo Koan. So I'll read that to you right now. When all dharmas are seen as the Buddha Dharma, there is delusion and realization, there is practice, there is life, and there is death. There are Buddhas and there are ordinary beings. When the myriad dharmas are each not of the self, there is no delusion and no realization, no Buddhas and no ordinary beings, no life and no death. Okay, contradictions right there. The Buddha's truth is originally transcendent over abundance and scarcity, so there is life and death, there is delusion and realization, there are beings and Buddhas. So contradiction of a contradiction. And though it is like this, it is only that flowers while loved fall and weeds while hated flourish. So 4 sentences, 4 views. So I'm going to explain those 4 views. And the best way to understand those 4 views is something I assume was figured out either by Mike Lutchford or maybe Jeremy Pearson, the 2 people who were working closely with Nishijima Roshi at the time. The best way to figure them out is to remember SOAR, S-O-A-R. Subjective, objective, action, and reality. Those are the 4 views. So I'm going to read to you what Nishijima Roshi wrote. I've shortened this a little bit to make it fit into the video format, but this is basically from that pamphlet I told you about called Understanding Shobogenzo. So, we read. This paragraph is composed of 4 sentences. The first is, when all things and phenomena exist as Buddhist teachings, then there are delusion and realization, practice and experience, life and death, Buddhas and ordinary people. What does this sentence mean? This sentence describes the situation when we think about the world on the basis of an idealistic philosophical system, so that would be subjective, a set of teachings. From this basis, we can find differences between many categories: delusion and realization, practice and experience, life and death, Buddhas and ordinary people. That's phase 1. 2. This contrasts with the second sentence, which says that there are no differences if we view the world, quote, when millions of things and phenomena are all separate from ourselves, end quote. This second sentence tells us that if we view the world from our own subjective point of view, that is objectively, so he says subjective, but we're talking about the objective point of view. So this is O, S-O-A-R, so objective, even though he said subjective, okay. That is objectively, when we view things objectively. We can find no difference in value between delusion and enlightenment, Buddhas and ordinary people, life and death. So the materialistic, objective view sees no difference in value between things because, materialistically speaking, everything has the same value. They are all concrete facts and have equal value as such. This is the scientific or materialistic viewpoint. Master Dogen clearly distinguishes here between the philosophical standpoints of the idealist and the materialist. Okay, that's number 2. Number 3. At the same time, in the third sentence, he separates the Buddhist viewpoint from these first two. He says that Buddhism is originally transcendent over abundance and scarcity, and so in reality, there are people and Buddhas. Master Dogen is saying that Buddhism is different from relative comparisons in terms of large or small, heavy or light. Of course, the meaning of the phrase originally transcendent over abundance and scarcity is not exact, but he seems to be saying that Buddhism does not belong to the area where we compare, where we say this is more valuable than that, this is not as important as that, and neither does it belong to the area of physical comparisons. Here we should pause for careful thought. Is it possible to have a philosophy which does not belong to the discriminating intellectual area? Is there a philosophical area in which we can transcend both subjective and objective criteria? The only tool we have to think about philosophical problems is the intellect. What does it mean to transcend philosophy in the area of philosophy? This is a very important point in understanding Buddhist teachings. Philosophers are prone to believe that the intellect is absolute, that there is nothing that we cannot analyze with the tools of logic, nothing that we cannot describe or discuss in words. Master Dogen gives an example in Chapter 10 of Shobo Genzo, Shoaku Makusa, aka Don't Be a Jerk. I called it Don't Be a Jerk in my book Don't Be a Jerk. Of this tendency of ours to cling to the intellect as the all-powerful. He quotes a discussion between a famous Chinese poet and the Buddhist master Choka Dorin. Haku Kyoi of the Tang dynasty was a lay disciple of Master Buko Nyoman and a second-generation disciple of Master Baso Doitsu. When he was the governor of the Kosho district, he studied under Master Choka Dorin. One day, Kyoi, the student, asked, "Just what is the great intention of the Buddha's teaching?" Master Dorin said, "Not doing wrong, doing right." Kyoi said, "If that is so, even a child of 3 could speak such words." Master Dorin said, "Even though a child of 3 can speak this truth, an old man of 80 cannot practice it." At these words, Kyoi immediately prostrated himself in thanks, and then he left. This story emphasizes the absolute difference between saying "don't do wrong" and actually not doing wrong. In our day-to-day lives, we are prone to forget this difference, the difference between the idea of right conduct and right conduct itself. This is one of the most important tenets of Buddhist philosophy, the fundamental and absolute difference between thought and action. Buddhists found that the area of our actions, our conduct, our behavior in this world is completely different from the areas of intellectual analysis or sense perception. This is the meaning of Master Dogen's statement in Genjo Koan. Buddhism is originally transcendent over abundance and scarcity, and so in reality there is life and death, there is delusion and realization, there are people and Buddhas. Although the sentence is a statement of Master Dogen's philosophical framework, it does not lay out an intellectual concept. It refers to our real actions, and it says that our real actions are outside the philosophical area. They transcend it. Okay, so all of that was number 3, section, or 3, and if I'm in that movie, Inglourious Bastards. Okay. So now we come to number 4, SOAR, subjective, objective, action, and reality. Number 4 is reality. Number 4, Master Dogen says in the last sentence in the paragraph in Genjo Koan, "Though all this may be true, flowers fall even if we love them, and weeds grow even if we hate them, and that is all." In this sentence, he tries to express the ineffable nature of reality. The use of symbolic expressions to capture the nature of reality itself is a step that we cannot find in the same way in Western philosophical thought. It is a step beyond the three-phased thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. It is a step beyond philosophy itself. Explanations of reality can never be reality. This is why I call my four-phased philosophical system three philosophies and one reality. The end. Okay, so that is what he says. So to understand Shobogenzo, you have to understand that Dogen is going to contradict himself all over the place, and that he's often going to use these poetic expressions to try to point to reality. And that's why, okay, the thing I did yesterday, that thing about Philip K. Dick and fantasies about enlightenment, I didn't intend it as such, but it was sort of a preview of what I wanted to talk about in this video. The fact is, you can't pin reality down. And Dogen doesn't try to pin reality down. He doesn't sit there writing out his description of what he thinks absolute reality is. He only points to it with these kind of weird abstract expressions because you can't pin it down. This is why it's kind of frustrating. You want him to tell you, okay, Dogen, you told us what reality isn't. Come on, tell us what reality is. He never does that, so it gets annoying. But he can't do that. He knows he can't do that, and that any attempt he makes to do that is just going to be nonsense, and he's not going to give you nonsense. But he's going to tell you what it's not, and that is going to hopefully help you point to what it is, and that what it is something you can see for yourself, but he can't give you in written form. Okay, so I've already gone over the time limit I set for myself, and maybe I'll do another video on this and try to get deeper into it, but that, in a nutshell, is how to understand Shobogenzo. I've totally failed to explain it, but hopefully I've given you some pointers that will help you figure it out for yourself. Okay, so if you want to support me totally failing to explain things on videos, you can go to the URL you are seeing on your screen below, which is hardcorezen.info/donate. That is hardcorezen.info/donate. There you will find links to my PayPal and Patreon accounts. Those are my main and usually only ways of making a living, and I really appreciate your support. But as always, this is offered for free, so you don't got to support me if you don't want to support me. We will see you next time. Have a good time all the time. Bizzles. Did you get all that? Do you understand Shobogenzo now? You're going to be able to read it for yourself now? Okay, good dog. All right, let's go inside and read Shobogenzo. Okay? All right, let's go read Shobogenzo. Good. Let's read Shobogenzo. You want to read Shobogenzo? All right.